Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings and similar phenomenon started when I was a kid, and how I kind of got into it was a friend of mine had a birthday party, and it was King Kong themed. And a couple days after that, I saw a show on TV where there was monkeys in the snow, and I was asking my mom why we didn't have monkeys in Washington, and she said that we don't have them here, and I was upset at that. And not long after that, she found a article in the newspaper about Bigfoot sightings in Washington, so she showed that to me, and that's how I kind of got interested in Bigfoot and stuff. So in those times, I, read a lot of articles, saw those Leonard Nimoy show and all that. And as I got older, I kind of drifted away from it because, you get into other things as a teenager. So, we moved to a resort in the middle of the Cascades when I was about 12. And one of the great things about living there, as a kid, that age is, the whole woods is your playground. And, I would hike into lakes every weekend at the least. And Bigfoot kind of really wasn't on my, radar at that time, really. A couple of strange things happened. One time I was fishing and a rock, a little bigger than a softball, come out of the woods and into the river, and I just shrugged it off as maybe one of my friends around or something. But later in life, I found that is a phenomenon then. So as I got older, a friend of mine, he broke his leg twice, the same leg twice, 8 months apart, and he was having a hard time recovering from that. So I took it upon myself to encourage him to go hiking and stuff. And we did some hiking, and then winter came. And as the spring came, we wanted to do some hiking. So we were kind of pushing the season. And one of the lakes that we've been to many times, we kind of was pushing the season, and we tried it earlier than, we normally would have. And we found our way up to the lake. It was kind of hard to follow the trail in places because there was a lot of snow. And when we got to the lake, it was about 3/4, half of it was still iced over. When we got there, I kind of looked around a little bit. He looked around some, and I was trying to start a fire, to warm up. And I hear him say, "Hey, what's that on the other side of the lake?" And my buddy, he can see, but not real well, especially at long distances. And so I looked across the lake, and like I said, I've been there many times. We've been there fishing, and I'm familiar with what people look like on the other side of the lake. It's probably 400 or 500 yards. And I look over there, and I see these two beings walking on two legs. And of course, first thing I think is people. And I'm kind of looking, and I'm like, man, those people are pretty big, and I'm looking a little closer, and I'm like, they got like hair hanging down off their arms. And my buddy can hear me saying this, and he can hear that I'm kind of trying to figure out what's going on over there. And he goes, well, it's got to be people in ghillie suits. And I'm like, we just hiked up the 3.5 miles in the snow. Did you see any, where would these people have gotten to the lake from? You know what I mean? Because behind this lake is just miles of wilderness. So I'm watching these things, and the way the lake is shaped, where we came in, one side of it, if these Sasquatch would have came around the one side of the lake, there was nowhere for them to go except to confront us. So the way they were going was through the side of the lake that has a mountain on it with a snow field, a glacier, I guess you could say. And it's kind of steep. Well, they walked towards that. And as I'm watching them, and my buddy could see, he couldn't tell the form, or see the legs and stuff, but he could see the body. I had better eyesight. I could see the arms and the legs, but he was getting concerned at how fast they were moving across the snowfield, because it's not a place people or animals would normally walk, and especially moving that quickly across them. And as we're watching them, we realized that if we watched them long enough and as fast as they were going, they could work their way around behind us and cut us off on the trail. So we decided that we would forget warming up in the fire and just head back out. On our way out, we didn't see anything or hear anything, but that's my best sighting. And my other sighting happened a few years later. It was my wife and I went camping, and once again we were pushing the season. Not quite as bad as that time, but we were still pushing the season. And it's kind of funny because the place we wanted to camp had snow, so we had to camp in this other spot that was a little more visible from the road. And a sheriff happened to drive by, and he's like, what are you guys doing out here? I said, well, we're camping. He says, well, I don't know why he thought this, but he's like, you guys know there's no cell phone service or anything out here. And my wife and I thought that was kind of weird for him to say something like that. But after he left, we did camp there, and the next day I had her drop me off at a trailhead where there was a lake. It was like a 2.5, 3 mile hike to the lake. It's Lake Minotaur, which is only about 10 miles from my other sighting, straight as a crow flies. I mean, if you walked it, it'd probably be 50 miles. So she dropped me off the trailhead, and I gave her a time that I would be coming out. So I'm hiking up to this lake. It's my vacation from work is what it was. And I brought my cell phone with me just as a timepiece. And I'm hiking along, in the nice, peaceful forest all by myself. And my cell phone starts going off. I'm like, what the heck? Well, come to find out I was, really close to a ski area, and I guess I got signal somehow in one little spot from the ski area. It was my boss asking a bunch of questions about the work. But anyways, that kind of perturbed me a little bit, and I hung up, and I'm walking along, and I'm getting this feeling that like I'm being watched. I'm all by myself, but I've hiked by myself many times and rarely have any feelings like that, but this time it was pretty strong. And I'm walking along, and I'm really, my head's on a swivel and stuff. And I get up to the lake, and sure enough, that lake was froze over completely. And I was wanting to go fishing. Well, I knew from looking at the maps and stuff, there was a couple other lakes around there. And so I walked over to the ridge where I could look down on the other lake, and it was about 1,000 to 1,500 feet lower in elevation, and it was ice free. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to catch fish. So I scaled down this really steep bank to get down to it, and I get to the lake, and I go around to where the outlet is, and there's just cutthroat everywhere. So I'm starting to fish, and they're not the biggest ones. They're like that I've ever caught, but they're good size, 12 to 16 inch cutthroat. And I'm just catching and releasing, and a couple of them I caught. I hooked them too deep, so I knew they would die, so I kept those. I wasn't fishing. I'm looking around because a lot of those high lakes are like in a bowl, and I'm looking around the bowl to see how to climb back out when I'm done. And I'm looking around and I see, most of it is really vertical. I look where I came down and I'm like, man, that looks nasty to try and climb back out of. And I'm looking around the rest of the bowl and I see this area where there's like a talus slope and the rocks were kind of like different colors. Like it looks like where people normally would walk up and down from the two lakes. And I hadn't been to this particular lake before. So I'm looking at that talus slope and my eyes are going up the slope and I see this area. I don't know if it's just a shadow or what, but it looked like maybe a cave or like an overhang. And out in front of that overhang, there was a flat rock and I could see something sitting on the rock. And like I said, I haven't been to this place before. There was nobody else up there. Another place where behind the lakes from the trailhead I came, it's just nothing but wilderness. And I can see a human-like form sitting on this rock. And I got spooked by it. And something inside me was saying, don't let it know you see it. So I kept my head moving and just kind of glancing at it. So that I kept fishing and stuff and acting normal like I didn't see it. And as I was fishing, every once in a while I'd glance over there. And after a couple hours of fishing, eventually it left. And so I still had the choice of going up where it was to get back to the other lake, back out of the trailhead, or to go up the way I came down. And I ended up going up the way I came down. Yeah. I wished I wouldn't have went that way, but that's how I had to do it. I climbed back out, and on my way back to the trailhead, I was running late, so I didn't expect to go to the second lake. But on my way back, I noticed wolf tracks in my tracks that were coming in. And at the time, the game department didn't acknowledge wolves in Washington, which was also kind of a cool highlight of that trip. And so when I got back out to the trailhead, my wife was there, and of course she yelled at me for being an hour and a half late. Other than those two sightings and that rock it was throwing, living in that area, I came across tracks a couple times, but never big track ways. I don't think I ever found two, so I was never 100% sure if they were real tracks or just, something that looked like tracks. Another pretty interesting thing that happened to me once was I'd get up in the morning on the weekends and we had this map on our wall, on our resort wall. It had all the lakes on it, and I would just point to a lake and I would go to that lake. Well, in the morning I decided what lake to go to, and I'm on my way to the lake, and the trail crosses a logging road, and scratched in the dirt in the logging road is High Greg, which is my name. And that was, wow, what a coincidence that is. That kind of disturbed me too. And I didn't see anybody else on that hike, but I always thought, it was probably one of my friends that did it one time in that summer, thinking that maybe I might hike to that lake at some point.
Bigfoot sightings are something I only heard about or saw on TV, and then I myself stumbled upon it kind of through the rabbit hole like Alice did. This particular one, it was 2016 is the last time I actually ran across it, but it all started 8 years before that. I was doing what they call a stalk hunt, which had my rifle. I was in camouflage, had my, orange hat, and I was following deer tracks, buck tracks. And I'm on my family property. You even know that it's like 200 acres. And I know for a fact there wasn't anybody in the woods with me, or they shouldn't have been. So I'm going on, and I get, I don't know, it's like a old dried up creek bed kind of depression in the ground there. And then it's like rocky bottom kind of. And, I stopped there because I was going to get a drink, because I'd been hot on this buck's tracks for a good 3 or 4 hours. And I stopped, and I had me a cooler, and I had some Coca-Cola and drink, sitting there just kind of like chilling out for a second. And I heard like a twig break, but I mean, it was a branch, but it was about 50, 60 yards behind me. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? I thought it was my uncle. He was a Vietnam veteran. He was a Marine recon, and he liked to stealth up behind me and scare the living crap out of me when I was hunting, because that was a big thrill for him. Well, I double back. There was a goat path. When I say goat path, it was like a trail that was no more than 3 foot wide. Only goats could go down it. And that's why it was so worn down. Well, I doubled back around on the main trail and went down about 20, 30 yards. And I came on to this. At first I didn't know what it was, because I was looking at the ground, and I looked up, and in front of me, the best way I could describe it was if you took Shaq, Yao Ming, and, well, no, not Shaq and Yao Ming, because that'd be 14 foot, but if you took Shaq and maybe like LeBron James, maybe, or, around about that size, and stacked them on top of each other, like LeBron standing on Shaq's shoulders, obviously, just covered with fur. I mean, he looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Lou Ferrigno from the Hulk, their muscle mass combined, because you could see the muscles through the fur. It was insane. And his face, I don't know if anybody's seen the National Geographic specials with the Neanderthal, the cavemen, but he had a wide snout, kind of like nose. His face was, everything was covered with hair except for his face. And his eyes were like the size of like 4 eyeballs. It was insane. And he had real dark pupils. Like, I don't know if it was black, like the whole little colored part of our eyes for him was just black, like coal. And I stood within at least 4 or 5 yards of this thing, and I'm standing there, and I ain't even got my rifle like at the ready position or nothing. I just kind of froze, because I was like, I'm not gonna let this thing, whatever it is, because I thought I was hallucinating first, but I even rubbed my eyes, and I looked at it, and it just stood there for a second, and I stood there, and it let out like I don't know, it sounded like a woman and a cougar like scream, but you turn the tone knob all the way up to like the highest pitch you can get, and it took off through the trees. And other than its shoulders hitting branches, it never made a sound. Like, I could hear its feet, boom, 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 but I could never hear no. They look like Bo Jackson. I mean, at times 100 running through these woods, and it was real thick woods. It wasn't any kind of like clearing or anything. I was like, well, that was interesting. I went on about my day. That's when weird stuff started happening. From then on out, I had a camper up there, and I'd go in there especially when I had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off work, I'd go up there and hunt during hunting season. Well, I kept getting bangs enough that it felt like it moved the camper. Boom, on the side of it. And I'd go out there and look, and there wouldn't be nothing there, and then I'd hear a whoop, like kind of close by. I was like, all right, well, and at that time I'd heard the whoops from the Find a Bigfoot show, so I was kind of like, well, I guess that's that one that I come on. And from then on out, I'd be hunting. I'd do stalk hunting, and now he would let me know when I got too close, because he would like knock on a tree toop, 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 sound like somebody hitting a home run with a Louisville Slugger wooden bat. Or he would whoop really loud, or he'd even do that, like kind of like a whoop noise, but not like a whoop. It was weird. But he let me know when I got too close, and I never really got the advantage on him again after that. But I've gotten close enough to him, and it's like a game to him. I went out there last week. It's like that game picked back up because I was walking my dog just to see if he was even remotely in the area. I call him George because he's gonna hug him and love him. Call him George like the bottom of a snowman. But my dog got close to him and he made much racket, scared the dog off. So I don't know if I like just got him one time and he was just like, I'm gonna get you, or I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm friends with him, but I showed him respect by like not backing up and not really doing anything, like knowing I wasn't going to kill him or nothing. I was just as shocked as he was, to be honest, by the whole stinking thing. Cause I was not expecting to turn the corner and see a 12-foot humanoid, whatever. I thought I didn't know what it was. And to this day, I've never seen an animal with that shade of black fur. Like, it could be nightfall, and I guarantee you, if he was standing in front of you and you couldn't see anything, you could tell his shade of black because it was black or not. I mean, it was the darkest shade of fur I've ever seen. And all this happened in the area that they got a railroad goes through a tunnel, and supposedly John Henry raced a steam engine there. The city of Leeds, Alabama, has a museum for it. I don't really know, but I know that the railroad crossing past the tunnel is called Bigfoot Crossing because the conductors said that the Bigfoot would get up on the sides of this, railroad track that was going through the mountains and stuff, and they would gather and watch the trains go by. So, I mean, there's just loaded over there with just Bigfoot stuff going on, and there have been stories of dogs getting killed. And one of my buddies that lived over there, his granddad said he saw one walking out of the woods through a clearing with 2 doe on his shoulders that he killed. And they had found deer hide and weird stuff on the bottom of a tree. Like, they picked the deer up and just slammed them up against the tree and killed them. So I don't necessarily want to say he's my friend or anything, because I would not invite that big dude over to the house to watch a ball game or anything, but he must like me because he really never even done anything aggressive or anything. And I'd heard people say, "Oh, you got to leave apples and stuff out." Well, I thought about just buy a couple of apple trees and some persimmon trees and stuff, like fruit trees, and just plant like a little grove out there. Just let them go get fruit off that. But I've firmly been a believer ever since I was a kid and saw that Patterson gimlet footage, I think is what it's called, where the one was walking across the creek bed or whatever. I said, anything's possible. It's like the Loch Ness Monster. Something prehistoric could have been, got stuck in there. Or, who's to say that Bigfoot, because I've always heard, especially since I live in the Bible Belt, there's Jacob and Esau in the Bible. And Esau supposedly was covered the Bible says, from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet. And Jacob stole his birthright or whatever. Well, I've got a theory about it because I've heard, people talk about the lost tribe of Israel, and I've heard about the Edomites being the descendants of Esau. Who's to say Bigfoot ain't descendants of Esau and would be the lost tribe of Israel? I mean, anything's possible, but they respect you if you respect them. I know that much because there've been times when I've been in the woods and gotten too close, and it's just it's a hair raising ordeal if you ain't been out there. Because I took my girlfriend out there one time, same place, because she was giving me crap about being, the Bigfoot's not real. Well, I took her out there, and sure enough, the big guy showed up and stood in plain view. And I said, "See, I told you." And she said, "Holy crap, you weren't lying." She ran back and got in the truck. We didn't go hunting that day, but it's just one of them things that I think anything's possible. But I mean, I don't want to sound too crazy by saying oh, he thinks that they're the lost tribe of Israel. I'm just saying, if you look at what Esau and his descendants, you never know. I mean, if you look at the evolutionary thing too, as far as the fossil records go, modern man, well, Cro-Magnon, which is the closest thing to modern man, showed up in the middle of the Ice Age in 200 years, which is unheard of as far as evolution goes, as far as we know evolution goes. So who's to say that something happened and they're just another branch of human that didn't quite evolve the right way? Because, like, if you look at it, even a Neanderthal skull, the way that their skull was shaped, the back of their brain was really a large section where your hearing, your sight, your smell, and your hearing, all that, all your senses are in the back of the brain. While ours is large in the front, where, deductive reasoning and logic and all that stuff. So who's to say that they aren't just a branch of Neanderthals or something? I don't know. I just find it fascinating. So coming to Alabama, it's the land of Bigfoot. After that one, I mean, I've seen females, I've seen little ones, like, even the little ones, this was crazy. These little ones are like 6 foot tall, and I swear it's like they're little babies. They even make noise like a baby. It's kind of weird. But I mean, I've just seen them and seen footprints, and I mean, I've had them knock on my camper. I've had them. I have had one experience while I was on a four-wheeler, and I think they didn't like the four-wheeler because they were throwing big old rocks at it. So, I mean, they weren't trying to hit me, because I feel like if Bigfoot wanted to hit me I remember the muscle mass of the first one I saw, the 12-footer, he could have thrown that thing harder than Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, any quarterback in the NFL today combined, and I'm sure he could have hit me. I used to live out there too, where all this happened, and I heard something that sounded similar to that, but it wasn't as high pitched. It was almost like something called for, I don't want to say a mating call, but it was almost like I don't really have the words to describe. It's like, it was a low pitch, but you could hear it. It had some punch to it, some volume to it. And I was just sitting there going, I mean, it went on for like an hour or hour and a half. And my dog I had at the time, the hair on his back was standing straight up, like, and he was pacing. And I'm like, and I heard it over the TV. That's how loud it was. So I turned the TV off, and I'm just sitting there. It's like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I thought it was something like somebody hollering for help or something. So I went out there with a flashlight like an idiot. I had a pistol just in case. I mean, I'm not going to shoot a Bigfoot. I believe it's one of them necessity things, I guess. But I'd rather find one that had died of natural causes than have to shoot it. That's just my opinion. But anyway, so I'm walking, and then the dog's with me. And the dog, he's trained to like track deer and stuff like that. Well, we come up on something. It was a footprint, and I wear a size 14. Right, I'm 6'6". I wear a size 14, and I put my foot. Now I didn't have a camera at the time, but I put my foot inside of this footprint, and it was a good maybe 9 inches bigger lengthwise, and about 5 inches or 6 inches or so bigger as width goes. And I'd never seen nothing like that. And you could see 5 toes. You could see, I mean, it had some weight to it. Now, we got up to where I kept hearing this racket. So me and the dog went on, and I followed it, and I got up to this clearing. Trees were broke, and there was all sorts of stuff all over the place. And there was like, whatever it was deadhead of this, and it didn't like us being there. So it made a mock, like, I don't want to say, you know how rhinos charge in the wild? You know, they won't charge full on. They'll kind of do like a little fake charge to like scare you. You see them all the time on YouTube, the safari videos. They'll run at you, but then they'll pull up like at the last second, and then they'll go around. And it wasn't trying to like be aggressive per se, but it was like, get out of here. We don't want you here. So I ain't lying. I beat the dog back to the house. Pictures and casts of this footprint that I found, because I remember the way I took, and I went back and I couldn't find it. I think personally that sometimes, if not all the time, they make a coercive effort to cover their own tracks, kind of, in a way, because I think it figured that I tracked its footprint. There were several of them, but that one, I think it kind of figured that I tracked it that way. There was another instance where I was in a tree stand way up, maybe 10 or 11 foot up, and I heard some walking on 2 feet. And I've been there for hours, and I'm like, oh man, what is this? I thought it was game warden or something. You know, make me get down because it takes a lot of effort to get up and down. But I watched, and it walked right up underneath me. And I looked down, and it was, I say it couldn't have been more than a year old or so, maybe 2 or 3 years old, if that. But it was a little bit, and then there was the mom right there behind it. And the mom was kind of big. And I say I knew that it was a kid, like a young one, because it was running around playing and stuff. And the mom would make noise at it. Well, I can't really tell you. I, as a human, can't make the same noise as what she was doing at that. It was kind of like if you ever watched like a monkey fuss at the baby for acting up or something at a zoo, or like a gorilla. It's kind of the same thing. It was just really wild to watch. I've seen footprints several times. I've seen footprints all varying different sizes. And I think the young ones have a wider footprint than the older ones. The older ones have a longer footprint and a wider footprint. And the young ones have a wide one, and then I guess they grow out. I don't really know. That's just my theory. But usually you'll hear coyotes, and it's really weird how that works. Because like you'll hear them whooping or knocking on trees, and you'll hear one way off in the distance whoop or knock on a tree, and then in the middle of them you'll hear a pack of coyotes yipping and raising Cain, and then it's like the other one comes to see what the other one's wanting, and the coyotes will follow it. I don't know if that's a thing but I've sat outside and listened to them, and the coyotes will move and got there because they'll kind of stay in the same spot for a while, and then all of a sudden they'll move when. My thinking is that the other one that was knocking from way off is coming, and the coyotes just kind of pick him up and go with him just to see what he's up to. Because I think coyotes are scavengers, so they'll pick up whatever Bigfoot leaves as far as deer and stuff go. Yeah, there's babies and stuff, but the real hot spot is, like I said, that railroad crossing that they call Bigfoot Crossing. I mean, there've been hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of sightings there. And that's how the name stuck. It's weird, too, that this happened because I saw it. I mean, I never had any, per se, experience when I was around this, but my buddy told me about it way before Finding Bigfoot or any of them other shows ever made it like a common knowledge in the Bigfoot world. But I was out with him on his property, and this is about 6 to 10 miles away from where I was, where all this other stuff happened. And we were walking, his family owns like 1,000 acres. And we were walking, and he said, oh, I got to stop. And I said, what? I said, what's wrong? He said, you see that? And sure enough, there were 2 trees that had been picked up and drove with the roots sticking out. They were drove in the ground. And he said, my granddad says, don't go over here. He said, that's where them apes are. And I said, apes? He said, yeah. He said, I don't know. I've never seen one, but I think he was talking about a gorilla got out of the zoo or something. I'm like 15, 16. I'm like, okay, whatever. I wanted to go hunting with my buddy, so I listened to him. But then a couple of years after that, I saw Find Bigfoot on TV, and it said something about that. And I was like, well, I'll be darned. It's like they want you to know that that's their place. Don't mess with it type stuff. I don't really know what that signifies. It's just kind of weird. When I went on Cherokee Reservation with my uncle, this is probably the weirdest story I got. I was talking to they call him the village elder. I mean, this dude was like Rip Van Winkle mixed with he was old school. And I asked him about Sasquatch. And he's told me a story about when he was younger, his granddad told him to beware of the hairy men, the Sasquatch, because there were stories of them, females and sometimes males, with baskets on their back, and they had tree sap on their hands, is what he said. And he said they would run around and they would get kids and women and throw them in there. But I always thought that was kind of worth noting that he told me that. And I mean, I was over there on the res. I was there for about a month or two, and I had smelt just this most god awful smell I'd ever smelled. It's like sulfur mixed with dog crap, mixed with like raw sewage and crossed with like meat that had been sitting out forever. It was bad. And like the dudes we were fishing, dudes we were with, they cut line and dipped. They said, we're out of here. And so, I mean, I left too. I didn't stick around to see what was going on as far as that week. And I mean, I smelled the same kind of smell when I walked up on that 12-footer, but it wasn't that intense. It was more like a cow smell. I don't really know. It's like, it smelled like I hadn't bathed in a while, I guess, if they do bathe. I don't know if they do or not, but I know you could smell him. But it wasn't like the pungent stuff that people talk about, like, oh, I smelled the skunk ape, or, you know, it wasn't nothing like that. I mean, it didn't make me gag or nothing. Now, the smell in Oklahoma made me gag, like, I just think about it makes me kind of sick. But, I mean, yeah, that was something. I never heard of Bigfoot eating people, but I've heard people say that the 411 thing, I don't know if that's true or not. I really don't know. But I know that's the story he told me when I was on the res. I mean, I have no reason to doubt a 80-year-old full-blood Cherokee Indian. But yeah, that's all my things. It's just run the mill other than walking up on him. I mean, it's kind of like a game of tag. It's pretty, I mean, I don't feel threatened by it. I walk in the woods. It's just this, my thing to people is if you respect them, they're going to respect you. It's just like, you know, you live your day-to-day life. They live their day-to-day life. Just let them be. But hopefully I'll have some more because I'm probably going to go hunting. Let's see. I got till the end of January now. So I'll probably go hunting one more time or so before the season's out. So maybe I'll run across them again. I don't know. I don't necessarily go looking for them either because I feel like if you go looking for them, that's when you run into them and you end up pissing them off.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the 5-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.